Hello, class. Glad I finally am able to get this up. Sorry, I intended to get it up on Monday, but it's just been a bit of a hectic week. So here it is, and we're in week 10 now, which is pretty amazing to me. The semester is just barreling by, and it's amazing how quickly you go from half over to 2/3 over. We're just about 2/3 done. I guess there's 16 weeks, so next week will be over the 2/3 mark, and then things will very quickly going to be wrapping up. I'm already starting to feel a little wistful that we won't be meeting virtually anymore. Really enjoyed this class so far. So first off, let me address a couple questions. I put a post up or a forum up to ask for questions, and no one responded. I was about to take it down, but then Alexandria asked some questions literally 2 seconds before I took it down. So I'm going to answer those questions. The first is feedback on assignments and how that works. What I do is provide you with what I feel are the most pertinent points that I feel will help you move forward. If you and I'm gonna continue to do that. Individually, if you would like more feedback, please get a hold of me. That's what I'll say. Frankly, I just don't have the technical expertise to go through and grade papers digitally and give line by line feedback on papers. I fully admit that's one of the things I need to work on. And I am very willing to go over your papers. I'm happy to go over your papers physically, line by line, point out any the smallest errors or suggestions that I might have line by line. But I do need a physical copy for that. So what I'm asking you to do is to get me a copy with your address, so that there's no question about the fact that I have your paper, that I'm going to give feedback and get it back to you to where you can get it. This Alexandria mentioned that there's another way to do that, where there's mailboxes at centers. That's fine. However you want to receive your paper, simply address it to that place, whether it's at NPC where you can retrieve it, or at your home. Okay, and I will go through whatever paper you want me to minutely and give you more detailed feedback. Okay, there's a question about the grading rubric. I do include that on my feedback on Moodle. So there's I think 6 categories that I look at, and so I realize that may not give you all the information you need, but it does give you a sense of what the categories are that are important that I'm looking at. I also, I think it was in week 5, posted the peer review sheet that I use in my person-to-person classes. And I highly recommend that you look at that as a way of going over your final revision, to go through and check mark off all of these points. There's about 15 or 18 of them that you can go through and make sure that your paper is meeting all the criteria that I'm looking for. Okay, I will repost that peer revision sheet next week. Okay, make a note of that. And so that's a very handy guide to have just at hand as you're writing your paper and as you're making revisions, to have that peer revision sheet, and you can be your own peer revisionist, or have someone else look at it. I mean, I highly recommend that. Have someone else look at the paper with that sheet in hand and make any suggestions he or she might care to make. Okay, and then finally, I absolutely recommend you come and see me. You call me either during my office hours. I'm in the writing center at NPC, at LCC, Little Colorado campus, on Thursday from 12 to 3, in addition to my office hours. So I can't take calls during that time, but you can come in. During my office hours, I can take calls, and we can go over whatever paper you might have questions about. Okay, or make an appointment. I mean, if you call me or email me, we can set an appointment up that fits your schedule better. Okay. Having said that, I think the first batch of papers were really exceptional, and I have not gotten to the second batch yet. I'll do that this weekend, and I should have them done by the time I put up week 11 material. Okay. In week 11 material, I'm going to post the third essay assignment, which will be over either Apollonius or Gawain. Okay, and so you'll start working on that this week as we start with Shakespeare next week. And I'm also going to post the research assignment, the research paper assignment. Okay, this that will give you a full 6 weeks to work on that. And you don't have to start right away. You can wait till the third paper is done if you want. But I do want you to have an idea of what's upcoming and be able to plan out your schedule so it meets your requirements, and so you're able to get all that done. I think I mentioned this before, but what I do allow is for you to take one of your first 3 papers and revise and expand that to meet the requirements of the research paper. Okay, so that is perfectly fine. Use one of your first papers if you really liked it as a draft, and move forward and expand it. That would require, extensive revision and expansion, of course, to basically triple the size of the paper. But that is an option, and that you've already got some work done on these. So if you liked what you worked on, continue to do that. That's fine. The other option, of course, is to write a completely new paper over anything we've covered this term, and that would include what we're starting on next week, Shakespeare, which won't be covered in one of the first 3 papers. So a lot of people might be interested in writing their research on that. We also have, after that, we have Alice in Wonderland, Voltaire, Voltaire's Candide, and what's the other one? Siddhartha. I think those are the 3 that we have left after that. I might be forgetting one, but that should cover it. So, especially if you're going to write on Alice, if you really would like to write on Alice and Siddhartha, do a little preliminary work on that. Just kind of look around, see. I mean, if you're not familiar with them, to see if that's something you'd like to work on. Just briefly, Candide is an Enlightenment era text, English text, that is a really fun story, but also kind of epitomizes a lot of the views and ideas that were prevalent during the Enlightenment. Okay, the Age of Reason in England and Europe. That's actually a French text that has been translated, and one of the most beloved Enlightenment era texts. The Alice in Wonderland, I think everyone should be familiar with that. Not just a children's book. I want to emphasize that. It is a wonderful book, very amusing, certainly, but also a lot of very sophisticated ideas are being worked out there and explored. And it's one of my favorite books for sure. And I'd be delighted if anyone would want to tackle that in a research project. And the third one is Siddhartha. It's a fictionalized account of the life of Buddha. I don't have my terminology quite correct, but Siddhartha, I want to say Guantanamo, but I don't think that's it. Gautama Buddha. And so it's somewhat philosophical, somewhat spiritual, but is kind of a lifelong journey, which fits in a lifelong journey toward enlightenment, which definitely fits into our terms. So if you're interested in Eastern ideas, Eastern philosophy, Eastern religion, yoga, these kinds of things, that might be something you could be interested in. But of course, it's the last book we're going to cover, so you really have to read ahead. If that sparks your interest, pick it up now and start trying to read ahead a little bit. Okay. The other question was about kind of supplementary information, fun facts about these books. I could probably do a little bit more. I'll try to do a little bit more. I work that into my narratives, my weekly narratives, and into these videos. And if I feel like something is relevant, I will definitely add that, and I'll move ahead with a mindset of trying to do a little bit more of that, provide a little background information where it's possible. So that brings us to the book. Finishing up with Apollonius. I'm very pleased with what we did on that. I think there were some reservations expressed here and there about things like it takes a long time to get into the story, and I'm fully aware there are some kind of some parts that drag a little bit, but it's also important to ask why that is. I mean, think of when the time that this was written, which was anywhere time between 250 to 300 BC, right? So it was before Rome, after the really glory of Greece, but really the period right before Rome took over as the preeminent power in the world. And it was a major time of transformation away from living in a very isolated city-state, and think Ithaca from the Odyssey. That's sort of the model of how people lived in a very small community, and leaving that community and journeying was a rarity, just like Odysseus. Odysseus' journey was a rarity, and that's what generated much of the excitement in the book. It was going to see strange new things and encountering strange new peoples and things. He went boldly where no man had gone before, to paraphrase a more recent usage of that kind of idea. And Jason is the same. But there's not as much necessarily fear about the unknown, about distant places and peoples and customs, but really an insatiable desire to know. So much of the Argonautica, in Greek, the Argonautica, Jason, the Argonauts in our translation, is a kind of a travel log, a kind of a living vicariously through these heroes and experiencing all these foreign, strange, exciting, exotic places and all the customs that they had. So there's a real interest, for instance, when he comes across the peoples who have sex out in the open, for instance. You get that feeling throughout the text that he's trying to bring these strange customs of other people to the people of Alexandria who are reading this book, and that provided so much of the appeal and the allure of the book was that kind of travel log, travel guide kind of element to it. And unlike previous times, these were now places they could actually go. I mean, travel and trade just opened up exponentially during that time, and only even increased during the Roman era, which was just right around the corner because of the vastness of the Roman Empire and their maintenance of a system of roads and kind of law and order throughout the kingdom, the empire. Travel was still dangerous. It was always dangerous. There's always the possibility of banditry, especially piracy and banditry. But the dangers were diminished incredibly. So the journey as a kind of realistic concept for kind of average people who had at least some means at their disposal, some money that they could use to pay for expenses, was a more realistic possibility from kind of the age of Jason in about 250 300 onward up to the Roman Empire, up through Middle Ages, where we find ourselves now, with Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. So now this becomes a bit of a problem because, as far as providing background, because we're dealing with King Arthur, Arthurian literature, which is so vast. It was such a popular subject for literature and art throughout the Middle Ages, and never really flagged in its popularity. Perhaps a little bit in the Renaissance and Enlightenment, but in the Victorian era, in the 1900s the 1800s in England, it became just incredibly popular again, and has remained popular to this day. I think today King Arthur is one of the most popular kind of mythologies or subjects of fantasy and art and literature and film. There seems to be a new King Arthur movie every 3 or 4 years, and witness the latest one. I think I'm not remembering, King Arthur: Legend of the Sword, I think it was called, which was a very, very modernistic take on King Arthur. And I actually kind of liked it. It didn't get very good critical reviews, but I enjoyed it quite a bit. And some with every retelling, things change and things are different, but it's the kind of subject matter that gets reinterpreted with each telling. So much of a current era's values and priorities get placed onto the subject matter, so that we saw, for instance, the diversity of King Arthur's court, Camelot, was of paramount importance, and the idea of cooperation, like we saw with Jason, right? The idea of cooperation and teamwork overcame the idea of a single hero being able to do everything. And then let's see, and also this idea that King Arthur in this movie is reluctant to sort of take control as an autocratic leader. That's also, I think, a big theme in this current movie. Now, I don't. So for these reasons, I don't really have a whole lot to say about the background of King Arthur. It's just everywhere. You read Wikipedia, read any encyclopedia, and there's just so much there. If you're really interested in this, there are, I think Excalibur is the best movie, first of all, from the 80s. It's one of the first modern movies about King Arthur. I think probably the best one out there, the serious one. Now, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, on the other hand, is just a pure work of genius, and is just a wonderful thing. If you have not seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail, that is one thing that I recommend, just wholeheartedly. But there's connections everywhere. Like I think I mentioned in one of my writings online, the Indiana Jones movie covers it. One of the quests that they go on in Indiana Jones is to recover the Holy Grail. So again, this runs through our culture, and I'm sure a lot of you probably actually know more about King Arthur than I do. I'm not an expert. I know it as a pop culture phenomenon, and that's where I kind of get my information from. I haven't studied it seriously as a scholar necessarily. So I think that's about all I wanted to cover. The questions, the essays coming up, and the two texts were kind of in between here now. I'll definitely have some more to say about Shakespeare, and I'll try to get a video up early next week to kind of, again, cover some of that background information and fun facts that Alexandria wants to hear about, and probably more of you as well. That's what I want this to be fun. I want your experience of reading these works to be fun. I guess I could say this video is getting a little bit long than I wanted to, but Gawain and the Green Knight, I think maybe I would say a few things about this book in itself. It's a really interesting text. The posts I've seen so far, I think, are getting some good ideas. And and it has a kind of a fairy tale quality to it, right? I mean, it's not a book of has a really realistic focus, obviously, but I think that's kind of the point. And so, I think a way of looking at this is to think about what is being compared, what is being put up against each other. And I think we have, so what parallels are there in a sense? What contradictions are there? Because we have this very clear kind of dichotomy between the Green Knight and everything he represents, and King Arthur, Camelot, everything that represents. And one way of looking at this is not the definitive way, but certainly a way of thinking about it is the idea of the natural world being represented by the Green Knight. Green, obviously. He's always described as wild and kind of unconstrained, and obviously he goes on the hunt and is involved in that pursuit, kind of like Gilgamesh was. I mean, there's some parallels there, I think. And then the artificial world, the man-made world of Camelot and Gawain. The codes. I mean, codes are not natural, right? Codes are man-made. They're constructs. So you have a kind of everything that's represented by the green world, the natural world, and you can even bring in paganism, right? Paganism, the non-Christian side of things, side of the world, side of spirituality, and it's very clear that those values are questioning the values of the world that Gawain comes from. The codes that they claim to live by are being challenged. Not obviously, it's kind of a lighthearted text, a lighthearted story, but there are serious ideas behind it, I think. And if you're going to take lessons from this book, there's the kind of ideas that perfection is unattainable. That all we can do is try to live up to the system of codes and laws and ideals that we establish. But again, the reminder that these are ideals and codes and values that we create and try to hold ourselves up to. Sometimes we're successful, sometimes we're not. But I think that's a good way of kind of entering into the text, is seeing these pairs of opposites and the kinds of things, the kinds of insights that can be gained by looking at how these opposite worlds, opposite realms sort of collide. Okay? And I think that'll be it for today. This has gone way too long, I'm sure. I'm sure you've clicked on some other clickbait by now. But thanks for everything. And Excelsior, I'll just end with that. Okay, have a great week, and look forward to reading your posts and your papers, and I'll see you next time when we talk about Shakespeare.